Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. In this video, we're going to discuss advanced scan. We will look deeply into the advanced scan template. We will review a lot of features. The advanced network scan is similar to the basic network scan, but also allows you to tweak the performance settings, enable extra modules like brute force password checking, malware scanning, web app module, and some other options. Now, if you go to this link over here, you see it, okay? Uh, in this page, it will give you like quite a bit explanation about the difference between them. Here, if you see, the basic network scan will perform similarly to advanced network scan. The difference is what? Allows fine-tuning of the plugin included in a scan, has some different default settings, allows audits to be added. So, but, however, still the basic network scan is a great policy for average network scan. Okay, and here you can see the table, the difference between the basic network scan versus the advanced scan. And you can decide for yourself which one you want to go for. Now, for the basic settings here, I already went through it in other video. Please refer to Nessus host discovery video. Okay, now we will go into the discovery. Okay. Here we have the host discovery. Now, remote host ping. This one, you could leave it on if you're testing, computers on the network, but make sure to switch it off if you are testing VMware guest systems. But we're gonna leave it on for this video. Now, test local Nessus host. I will uncheck it unless you have a good reason to do so. Now, use fast network discovery. This allows the scanner to quickly identify a live host on a network before conducting a more thorough vulnerability assessment. Okay. Now, for the ping methods, you have different options like ARP, which basically scans only local network. Okay. And TCP, and here you could decide about which port, like you see, I would say from port 1-1024, okay? ICMP, okay? Now, if you check this box here, assume ICMP unreachable from the gateway means the host is down. This means that the host is down and Nessus will receive ICMP unreachable message. Enabling it will speed up the scanning process. The other option here you have UDP. This is stateless protocol with no handshaking, like TCP. And however, the scan is not very reliable here. Now, in the fragile devices, okay, like you have to be careful selecting scan network printers because some printers would not function well if you try to do scanning to it. Novell, nothing happened. For scan operational technology devices, this refers to programmable logic controls PLCs and remote terminal units RTUs. Now, the PCL, by the way, can be found in elevators, automatic doors, roller coasters, etc., etc. While the RTU is a microprocessor-based electronic device used in industrial control systems, to connect different hardware to distribute control system, or in SCADA, which stands for supervisory control and data acquisition. Okay. Now, for Wake on LAN, okay, you could upload a file that contains a bunch of MAC addresses over here. And for the boot time wait in minutes, this is 5 minutes, by the way. Okay. This is the amount of time to wait for host to boot up, okay, and fully started before performing the scan. Now, the second one is the port scanning. In the port scanning here, consider unscanned ports as closed. The default setting tells the Nessus to scan approximately 4,790 commonly used ports. You can change the setting, the full setting to scan 65,555 ports, including the zero port, or you could set the range right here. Now, this section over here will focus on doing enumeration for SSH, WMI, SNMP, and some others. Now, in this option over here, you're asking Nessus to use netstat to check for open port. This is good for Unix or Linux machines. Now, the same thing goes for WMI, SNMP. And this option here only run network scanners if local port enumeration fail. Now, when this feature is enabled, Nessus will try to identify open ports on the target system using local port enumeration technique, you know such as creating the local operating system for open ports. If Nessus cannot identify all open ports, it will perform a network port scan to identify any remaining open ports. Okay. Now the second option here, verify open TCP ports found by local port enumerators. Now, uh, this to confirm the status of open TCP ports identified by local port enumeration, such as netstat, as we've done here, before performing a network port scan. Now, for the network port scanners, if you select this box, this is the SYN flag in the TCP header. This will identify open TCP ports on the targets. The SYN scan is useful for Windows and Mac OS to avoid performance issue. Now, if you select it, override automatic firewall detection, this feature is used to override the automatic detection of firewalls during the scanning process. When this feature is enabled, the Nessus will assume that there are no firewalls between the Nessus, the scanner, and the target system and perform the scan as if no firewalls were present. This can be useful in cases where the automatic firewall detection is not working correctly, or when there is a need to test the target system without considering the firewall. Now, as for the UDP, now here it says, due to the nature of the protocol, it's generally not possible for a port scanner to tell the difference between open port and filter UDP port. Enabling this option may dramatically increase the scan time and produce unreliable results. Okay. Now, next step, we're going to talk about the service discovery. Now you can see the general settings here. Probe all ports to find services. Now here you attempt to map each port, each open port with the service that is running on that port. Okay. Now, if you check this box over here, search for SSL, TLS, DTLS services. This will specify which ports on a target host the scanner searches for these services here. Now, here you could select all TCP ports, or you can select non-SSL TLS ports. Okay, so he will keep it as is, and then search for DTLS port, none or known or all. Now, by the way, DTLS stands for Datagram Transport Layer Security, which is a protocol that provides secure communication between applications that exchange data over datagram UDP transport services. It's just keep in mind that this is a type of TLS, transport layer security, designed to work with datagram protocols. So we keep it for now. Here, if you want to identify certificate expires within certain number of days, okay. Here, if you want to enumerate all SSL TLS ciphers, when selected, Nessus will ignore the list of the ciphers advertised by these services and enumerate them by attempting to establish, communications using all possible ciphers. Now, if you selected this option over here, enable CRL checking, okay, this used by Nessus to check if none of the certificates has been identified, okay, during the scan, is what? Revoked. Okay. The last one, identity. Now, collect identity data from Active Directory. Okay, if you check this box over here, okay, Nessus will attempt to gather user, computer, group objects from Active Directory. Uh, if you want to enable it, you have to specify the Active Directory user account for the scan. With this, we concluded the discovery. The next step is we look into the assessment. Okay, now we will look into the assessment page. Now, first thing we have the general. In the general here, if you check override normal accuracy, sometimes Nessus cannot accurately identify a vulnerability remotely. If the report paranoia is set to show potential false alarms, Nessus will report a vulnerability every time, even if there is some doubt about whether the remote host is affected or not. On the other hand, okay, if the paranoia setting is set to avoid potential false alarms, Nessus will not report any vulnerability if there is slightest uncertainty about the remote host. Therefore, disabling, this option, or disabling this setting as a middle ground between the two options is recommended by Nessus. Now, about perform thorough tests. Now, this causes various plugins to work much harder and can cause much more network traffic and analysis in some cases here. Okay. This scan is intrusive and more likely to disrupt your network or impact scan speed. For antivirus, Nessus can permit a particular time to pass before reporting, you know, time before reporting when antivirus signatures are seem to be obsolete. Now, here, if you want to configure SMTP server, you have to set the domain coming from which address to which address. That's assuming that you have an SMTP server. Next one is the brute force. Nessus will test uh, the default account and non-default passwords. Now, this option is set to prevent an account lockout because you provided the correct username and a password. Okay, and this is something that you have to do in Credentialed here. Now, the second one is the web applications. Now, in the web application here, the first option, if you, if you kept it enabled, here you have under general settings, use a custom user agent. So basically, you're telling Nessus to which browser to mimic while scanning. You could change that to whatever browser you prefer. Now let's look at this is very important feature is the web crawler. Now this test is a test that uses vulnerability scan that checks for common web vulnerabilities by crawling through the website pages as you see it here and analyzing the responses. This test is designed to simulate, the behavior of a hacker, trying to exploit, the website vulnerabilities. Now, Nessus will check for common web vulnerabilities like, cross-site scripting, SQL injection, and so on. Now, here in this first option here, you're telling to start crawling from here. You could change that if you want, depending on the website. Here, if you wanted to exclude certain pages here, and you can add more. Uh, Maximum pages to crawl, 1,000. Maximum depth to crawl, 6. Now, if you selected this option here, follow dynamically generated pages, you telling Nessus to follow dynamic links, which is going to exceed the above parameters is set over here. Now, for application test settings here, uh, if you decide to enable this feature here, enable generic web application test, here Nessus will abort the test if HTTP login fails. So be careful with these settings. Now here, if you want Nessus to try all HTTP methods, like by default the web application test only use GET requests unless you enable this option. In this case, Nessus use POST request for for enhanced web form testing, so it can give you a better result. Now here, attempt HTTP parameter pollution. Nessus will attempt to bypass filtering mechanism, by trying to inject certain content into different variables while supplying the same variable with a valid content. Here, test embedded web servers. This is something you need to be very careful. The embedded web servers are referring to those web servers built into like small devices, like like a router, for example, or printers. Which, as you're aware, that those small web servers allow you to manage and configure these devices using web browser. Now, embedded web servers may be prone to crash or even does not respond if it's scanned. So Nessus recommends that you scan those separately. Okay, now test more than one parameter at a time. Here in this option is necessary to test more than one parameters in the web server at the same time. Like username and a password. This is just an example. This is because web applications can have multiple input fields that could interact with each other. Now, the vulnerability may only appear in a certain conditions when you combine different combination together. So it is recommended to check it. Now, here you could test random pairs of parameter. Here, if you want to test all pairs, very slow. Here, if you want to test random combination of 3 or more parameters, that's even slower. Here, test everything, that's even the slowest thing you want to do. Now, finally, here we have do not stop after the first flaw is found per web page. If you enable this option here, okay, this option can be necessary to test more than one, enabling this option ensure that Nessus scans the whole web page for vulnerabilities, even if it's already identified one. So you might as well, keep this, checked and like saying that do not stop, okay? And here you could say look for all flows here. That's very slow. It's going to take a long period of time to do it. Now, for Windows, okay, for Windows option over here, if you look at the first general setting, request information about the SMB domain. Now, if you enable this option here, Nessus will query domain names instead of the local domain because it says here, oops. Okay, I'm back now. Okay, so the other option here, user enumeration method, and that's if you want to enumerate SAM registry, ADSI, and WMI. Now, if you selected the SAM registry, Nessus enumerates users through the SAM registry, which stands for Security Account Manager. If you selected this option here, Nessus will enumerate users through Active Directory Service Interface, EDSI. Okay. But however, if you select this option, you have to go into the credentials here under miscellaneous ADSI and configure the credential. Now, if you selected this option, WMI query, okay, now this option here, it will try to enumerate users through the Windows management interface. Okay, the last one here, if you enable it, RID brute forcing will enumerate users through what's called relative identifier, RID brute forcing. See, enabling these settings enables the enumerate domain users as well as local user settings here. Now, for the malware, if you decide to select this option here, okay, if you want, you could disable DNS resolution. Now, checking this option will prevent Nessus from using the cloud to compare scan finding against known malware. Now, okay, now for hash and allow list files, here you got options to upload files that contain certain information. Like, for example, the custom netstat IP threat list. Uh, this, if you uploaded a file, it contains a list of known bad IP addresses you want to detect and scan. Now, if you provide your own list of known bad hashes algorithm here, okay, so you're telling Nessus plugins that so you, so in this case you are using Nessus plugins which are designed to identify MD5 hashes that are known to be associated with malware or any other type of security test. Now, if you enable or if you selected uploaded the file, simply basically you're turning it to to check for known good known hashes here by you. Now, hosts file allow list, if you upload a file, Nessus check system host files for sign of a compromise. If you upload file containing a list of IPs and host names, that scan will ignore during the scan. So it means forget about this part. Now here, for the Yara rules, this tool, by the way, it's limited but not limited to, with the aim of helping, malware researchers to identify and classify certain samples of malware. Now, if you do file system scanning, it's very simple. You have to select depending on your target. Is it a Windows machine, or is it a Linux machine, or it's a Mac OS. And here you could, like, let's say, for example, if you want to scan Windows machine, you want to select this option to scan system 5 for Windows. You want to select the program files. You want to select the program files that with x86 or program data, or even scan user profiles. Okay, that's if it's a Windows machine. See, that's what you could customize. Now, if you have Windows and Linux machine in your network, you can select those two as well. And if you have a Mac, you can select those as well. So this is targeting mainly the directories in a specific operating system. Final one, you could always customize the file scan directories here. Okay. Now, for the database, this use detected SID, and this is mainly for Oracle. Now, according to Nessus, when enabled, if at least one host credential and one Oracle database credential are configured, the scanner authenticates to scan targets using the host credentials, and then attempts to detect Oracle system IDs locally. So this will conclude the assessment part. Now, next step, we will look into the advanced. Now let's take a look at the advanced has very interesting settings here. For example, the first option enables safe checks. If you enable it, it will disable all plugins that may harm the remote host and cause some issues. Now, the second one, stop scanning hosts that become unresponsive during the scan. This can be useful, like if users switch off their computer system during the scan, or for some reason the computer stop responding. If it's not checked, okay, Nessus sends unnecessary network traffic and delays scan. Scan IP addresses in random order. By default, Nessus scan in sequential order. Now, if you check it, it's typically useful in helping to distribute the network traffic during large network scan size. Automatically accept detected SSH disclaimer prompts, like some SSH will produce a message. Now, this will automatically attempts to agree to the prompts in SSH connection that Nessus are configured to recognize. Now, scan targets with multiple domain names in parallel. Now, like, let's say, for example, that if your company has multiple websites, okay, so you need to add those domain names into Nessus and select scan targets with multiple domain names in parallel option. Now, in this case, Nessus will then scan all three domains at the same time, rather than scanning one at a time. Now, create unique identifier in the host scan using credential. As it says, it will create a unique identifier for credentialed scans. This one here, for trusted CA, it will specify CA certificate that the scan consider, trusted. Okay. This allows you to use self-signed certificate for SSA authentication. Now for the second part here we have the performance option. Now, slow down the scan when network congestion is detected. Uh, this helps so that Nessus can adjust the scan to accumulate and, ease the bottleneck. Now, network timeout in seconds, you're asking Nessus uh, to wait until it receives a response. This is helpful for slow network. Maximum simultaneous checks per host, okay, or scan, okay, basically determine the maximum number of TCP uh, sessions here. And here you could see maximum number of concurrent TCP session per host or per scan. You could set this. I usually leave it in the default settings here. Now, for the Unix find command option, there is a find command option inside Unix, and you could simply configure Nessus to either include certain file path or exclude file path and file system here. Okay. From all the plugins that search using the find command, just make sure when you click on one of them is to add or to enter one file system per line with the correct file option. And this also will apply to Windows file search. You could exclude certain file path and you could include certain file paths. Now, for the debug settings here, if you check this box, log scan details, it will log the start and the finish time for each plugin used during the scan, and the plugins are right here. We'll come back to it later. Now, you have an option here to always report SSH commands if you want to check it that, you know, that was run against the target machine, or you enable plugin debugging. Basically, it attaches available debug logs from the plugins to the availability output of this scan. You can decide about the debug log level here, like you want a basic or advanced or full or unrestricted. And for the audit trail verbosity here, which is it controls the verbosity of the plugin audit trail, you could basically decide, you wanted to do audit for only scan errors or nothing, or the default settings. And this basically will conclude the advance. Next step, we will talk about the credentials. Now let's look at the plugin credentials. Now, if you click on the credential, you will have several categories to choose from. Okay. Now, let me just give you a brief idea about this option here. Credential page allows you to configure Nessus scanner to use authentication credentials during scanning. Configuring credentials allows Nessus to perform a wider variety of checks that can result in much more accurate reporting. This approach enables scanning very large network to determine the local exposure or even compliance violation. Now, it is important to remember that this type of scan has the same capabilities as a local user, meaning that the level of scanning, okay, is determined by the privileges assigned to the user account. The scan result will be more comprehensive if the scanner has higher privileges such as root or administrator. So like when I selected here the Windows, I could see that I could select the type of authentication I want, okay, and then I have to type administrator username, the hash, and the domain name. For example, I usually leave these checked. Now, if you want to do remote registry services during the scan, now this enables you to remotely connect to the host and access its Windows registry. Now, in order for a local plugins right here, to access crucial files containing application version details and system patch levels, Nessus requires access to the registry service. The second option over here, enable administrative shares during the scan. Now, to do a full credential scan, Nessus needs the ability to connect to a remote administrative shares. Like see the $ or admin $. These are hidden shares, okay, in Windows. Now, if the shares are unavailable on the network, this plugin will attempt to enable them, during the scanning process. Now, if you want to start the server service during the scan, enabling the server service may allow remote access to file shares, named pipes, and other system services. Now, the result, it might weaken the security of the target system or even facilitate a complete compromise of target. So you need to be extremely careful with this option. Now, with the plugins, if I, here you could see there are plenty of plugins here. Now, uh, if I click here, I will enable it, disable it. If I click here, I will have list of every FTP server that has availability in the database. Now, plugins are a very important component of Nessus because it provides a scanner with necessary information and instructions to identify specific vulnerabilities or misconfiguration, like in a different system, like web server, database, and operating system. Plugins are essentially scripts, just a script. Nessus uses it to scan for vulnerability. When Nessus scans a system, it runs the appropriate plugins for that system, and it will check for the vulnerabilities and provide you with a report about the issue found by it. Now, the report includes very detailed vulnerabilities. It's, severity and what's the recommendation. Now, the good news is what? Is that these plugins are updated regularly by Nessus to make sure that your system is always up to date with the latest known vulnerabilities. Now, users can also create their own specific vulnerabilities. And the list will go on and on. I'm going to show you some examples here, like, for example, like the Pro FTPD. I have a video. If you watch my YouTube video about exploiting Pro FTPD, okay, you will have an idea how to exploit it. Now, there are plenty of things. Like this is the video. I publish it. It's about exploiting the mode underscore copy. So, like the description here, you could see the description of the vulnerability that this remote host is running Pro FTPD and it's affected by vulnerability in the mode underscore copy module. Okay, and so on. And here you could see, for example, like if you want additional information, you just click right here. It will take you to Nessus, and you could read about it as well. Okay. Here, for example, it tells you that the plugin information when it was published, risk very high. It's 9.8, and some other CVSS information, and the vulnerability information, exploit available true, and when it was and the patch was published back in 2019, and so on. Now, this will give you a good idea about the features and the options of it. Now, the second step here, uh, we will do a scan against Metasploitable 2, okay, and examine the result using advanced scan. Okay, so right now the scan has been completed for the advanced scan. If you click on My Scan, you will see the result right here. And, and I want to show you the configuration I made. Configuration is the default one. I put down the name, the IP, and I want to save it under my folder, my scans folder right here. Nothing changed to those. For discovery, I enabled ping the remote host. I checked fast network discovery, and I kept the rest as is. For port scanning, I just changed the port scan. As you see, I kept the result, kept the rest of them as is. No change to the service discovery. For the assessment, I checked override normal accuracy, and I selected avoid potential false alarms and perform thorough test, which is actually took about like 2 hours to complete. Brute force, web application. I selected the web application. Now, if you don't want to do web application, you can always go to a special web application template and specify the level of the web application scanning. Windows, I check all the boxes. Malware, no need. For advanced, these are the changes I selected. And now let's go back to the report. In the report, you can see that there's 10 critical, 10 high, medium, and here the policy is advanced scan. It has been completed. It took about 2 hours. And in the pie chart here, you can see that there's 6% critical, 7 high, medium. It's very neat, very organized. And if you click here, you'll be able to see the list of all the vulnerabilities that has been discovered, including the information one. Now, uh, let's pick the Unreal IRCP backdoor detection. Okay, here it tells you that this one has a backdoor that allows the attacker to execute arbitrary code on the affected host. The best solution is to re-download the software. Now, if you want to know how this can be exploited, I have a video dedicated for this exploitation. Okay, you can always visit my channel and see for yourself how this can be exploited. Now, basically, uh, this is it. You know, quite frankly, there is much to learn using Nessus. Okay, and you can always download it for free. Also, I have another video about Nessus host discovery where I show you how to download the Nessus essential version. Uh, and you can download it at home. You could try it. You could see for yourself. Finally, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and hit button below. By subscribing, you'll be notified when I release new videos. And you'll be supporting my channel so I can continue create more content like this. Thank you again.